Not a huge Super ATV fan, but I looked at all the brackets for the Talon, and this bracket looked the nicest. You drill one hole here to mount the Fairlead. One thing I ran into is that the Harbor Freight 5000 Fairlead bolt pattern is a little wider. So those were the Super ATV holes. Those are the holes I drilled, and I connected the two to make it fit nice. Other than that, pretty good install, already test fit. The main part of the bracket, this goes up against the back of the frame rails, and these things sit behind the frame rail, and that's what most of your pulling power goes to. So really strong design, pretty decent how they made it. That sits like there, like so. Pretty straightforward. Also, I was gonna get like a better winch than a Harbor Freight 5000, but I can't beat the warranty, the fact that I can go locally, swap it out. And the one on, I've had like 3 of these 5000s, and they're really actually a decent winch for the price. Warn, I like their new winch. It's got a bunch of digital stuff going on. Only problem with it is, it doesn't have a wireless controller, and it's $900. This is $100. Sorry, Warren, not 9 times better. So getting this installed, could have used the winch a couple times today. Luckily, we had Richard there to pull us out. Update on the winch install for you. So it is a pain in the ass, to be frankly honest. Super ATV gives you really shitty instructions online that make it seem like, oh, if the instructions are only 2 pages, it must be simple. It is simple, but it's tight. So what has to happen is these 4 tins have to go onto this back clamp, right? But also the 4 bolts that hold the winch to the plate have to go on too. You can't get these tins in after you put the 4 bolts on here. So you're forced to do it all up in the frame. And if you don't believe me, look at these tins. Those ones way back in there. Yeah, this is the hard side, just where the gearbox is, a bigger diameter. There's no way you're gonna be able to get that sucker in once the sucker right here I'm pointing at, once the winch is already bolted in place. So you gotta do it all up on the bike together. I went ahead and stuck these 2 top bolts in on both sides to hold the winch up at the right spot while I torqued on all these tins. But the only way to get on some of those tins is to use the open end of a 10mm wrench. So those aren't torqued very well. And then to get to the bolts back here, you're not even gonna be able to see them. There's bolts that come in here. I mean, that's a tight spot. If I didn't have a flexible ratcheting wrench, it would have been near impossible / taking forever. It didn't take that long, but it's not real convenient. You can't get impact on any of the bolts. It's tight. And now once you get all that on, you gotta pull these 2 bolts out and reinstall your bumper and hope that it all lines up. Another thing is, this winch is not designed to be bolted this way and pulled this way, right? It's designed to be upside, it's basically upside down and standing up. It's really bad. So the rope is gonna hit this bar. You can put it on top of it, but then once the spool winds down, it'll hit it. Or you put it beneath it, but once the spool winds up, it'll hit it. So you're pretty much screwed. Your only option is to leave this one off. Now this winch does have 3, it's 1 and there's 1 in the back. So it's probably okay with this one left off as long as you torque those 4 good, but you can't torque those 4 good because you can't really get to them. I don't know if this is a different, this isn't as much of a problem with the Super ATV winch, but this mount doesn't seem to be super universal. Those 4 holes did line up. It gave you pretty big slots back there and 2 separate slots. So that bolted up okay, but the only problem is with the wide spool winch, those bolts end up on top of the bracket in the back. So it's really tight. It's not a super great design. I know it's a tight spot to stick a 5,000-pound winch, but knowing what I know now, I probably would have gone with a different winch. Also, the instructions suck. They didn't come in the box. I had to download them because Super ATV is trying to, like, I don't know, save trees to make up for all the pollution China creates making all their products or something. I don't know. One thing I do like about this winch is it should spool up nicely because there's a good amount of distance between the roller and the spool. When the roller mounts right here, you end up getting bunched up on one side or the other. So as long as it doesn't break, because I had to take this bar out, it should roll up smoothly. If you had synthetic and you put a little bit less winch on your spool, you could probably get it to fit underneath that bar. But you can see where it wants to sit naturally right there. It would be above that bar. So the bar is totally in the way for this winch design, or really not the winch design, the mount plate design. Super ATV, you know, rubbish as usual. All right, guys, so the winch is completely hooked up. Already went over this part of it, pain in the butt. Let's talk about how I routed the wires. So I ran them up here, zip tied them away from the fan. Don't want your wires hitting your fan. I decided to mount the solenoid right here. It's a nice sturdy place to mount it, 2 self-tappers into that frame rail. And if I need to get to it to work on wiring, it's very easy. Wiring right now is fairly temporary because I don't have my wireless controller yet. So you can see the wires run down here. And what I kind of did was, I can see that I need to put another zip tie right there, but I'm kind of following the throttle cable. The throttle cable's routed really nicely, so do need to put another zip tie now that I put the light down there and see it, to hold them to that bar, but I'll do that in a second. So then they come through here, you pull the tunnel, very easy, run right here. That's the throttle cable again, right next to the throttle cable, right next to the throttle cable, a couple zip ties to hold them off any sharp edges. Then they come through the tunnel, back there. You can see that they change colors. There's the red and it goes to yellow, that extend it. And then the blue, black turns into a blue right here because I had to extend it. And then they make a nice loop, and then they follow the factory wires up to the battery. Try to follow the factory mounting points, keeps it away from all the nasty stuff. Avoid sharp bends, avoid sharp corners, yada, yada, yada. And hooks are out to the battery. Talon's battery is really far away. The Razor's under this seat, so a little bit longer to route the wires. And unlike the Can-Am, they don't have nice big wires ran to the front for a winch already. But the winch is in there and it works. For the switch, I just did a little rocker that came with a Harbor Freight winch, put one screw into right there to hold it. On like Donkey Kong, it fit in that little pop out, know where it went. Eventually I'll get a switch that looks more like the Honda one that actually snaps in there. But, because those little switches are crap actually, those Harbor Freight switches. So I'll have a switch, that's the pop out. I'll have a switch and I will have the wireless eventually. Just gotta, wait for my wireless to come in. And then it's really easy to wire these things up. People get confused all the time. There's a lot of different wires. Basically, all that matters is this green wire and this black wire. Whichever one you give power to, one of those is forward, one of those is reverse. If your winch is running backwards and how you like it, switch them. There's a lot of different ways to get power to those things. You can do keyed power. You can tap into the red wire right here. You ran from your battery to get power, whatever. I ran from the red wire to here. Eventually, once I do my wireless setup, I'll do keyed power. That way my receiver doesn't draw the battery down or anything like that. But temporary setup kinda. Of course, this stuff came in after the ride. But things to look out for. Make sure your wires aren't just hanging like this. This is bad, I need to fix that. And also make sure your wires aren't near the fan, anything hot, any sharp edges, yada, yada, yada. If you have that big, I don't know, is it a 6-gauge wire short out to something? No bueno. Harbor Freight wiring is kind of junk, but you can't beat the value of that winch and you cannot beat the warranty. I say again, that winch mount could have been designed a lot more smart. Could have hung the winch completely upside down. That's how I would have done it. And then I wouldn't have to leave that top part off. But this is the winch mount I got. It's okay, it's sturdy, it's in there. We'll see how it does. And yes, I eventually plan to go to synthetic eventually, maybe, probably not. I don't know. On the Rubicon where I use the winch constantly, synthetic's really nice for your hands and everything, but this is more of an emergency situation type thing. Most of the time I'm gonna try to pull this thing out because winching it out very slowly is a little harder on the DCT clutches than it is to just yank it out with another bike. This is called a soft shackle. It's really nice, keeps you from tearing up people's stuff, and it's way better than a hook for reaching around frame rails and stuff. You can get them on eBay and Amazon, very cheap. What other question am I gonna get? This is just a random picture of a Talon on portals. I want to give you an update on the transmission. So I have found that when you shift into low, if you hold the shifter in the low position as you start to take off and roll, there's a very low chance of it jumping out of gear. If I'd have known that when I bought the bike, that'd have been a really good thing because I may have actually damaged the sub-transmission a little bit by letting it jump out of gear 3 or 4 times. So you got to be very deliberate when you're shifting to low. You've got to hold it there for a second. If you shift into low and it doesn't feel quite right, shift it back into reverse or neutral and then go back into low. I've been in a bind in 4-wheel driving a few times. I had a hard time getting it in low. That may be because mine's already popped out of gear and started to round the edges on the dogs or something. But the sub-transmission is not super user-friendly. I hate to say it, but the Polaris and Can-Am ATVs actually, not ATVs, side-by-sides actually shift better. It's pretty pathetic. Honda, you should fix that shit and put out a recall. But anyways, other than that, the Talon's doing great. I did drop the skid plates on it just to check to make sure that my shift linkages were tight, both where the shift cable mounts and where the shift arm goes onto the sub-transmission, they were. And I also wanted to take the skid plates off and look underneath it. A nice thing about the Honda skid plates on the Talon is that they're huge and there's a lot of place for mud to fall through, so it doesn't carry a lot of mud around like a lot of other side-by-sides. They look great on portals, obviously. Am I going to do it? Not sure. I love the way it handles, and I love the way I can whip it around and climb stuff. But it definitely needs some more clearance. I was playing with the T-Rex on 6-inch portals today in 37s, and obviously I got stuck more than he did. We did get him stuck once, though. That video will probably be out tomorrow. It's going to be very premium. But yeah, so just a few updates for you. Oh, also, it idles underwater really well, and took it really deep today, and the airbox is very well sealed. Go ahead and wiggle it. So that's nice and tight. That bracket's not moving. That's annoying. I was hoping it was just going to be loose down here. Actually shift it? Huh. Yep. Piece of crap. So there's the tunnel. Big old beefy drive shaft, coolant lines. Not a whole lot going on down here. Pretty simple compared to some other models. You don't have all the carrier bearings and all that bullshit. Very beefy frame.